may hear him. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Hey, what's up with it, family? It's Hot Boxing Minute. Let's talk boxing. The topic of the day is going to be the difference between undisputed, unified, and lineal. Look, we all know Canelo Alvarez is on his quest to become an undisputed champion, and there seems to be a lot of misunderstanding amongst boxing fans in general what that really means or what that really entails. And the fact that that misunderstanding is there has been exploited a lot, especially by boxing analysts in the social media space. Especially I've noticed the ones who really don't know much about boxing like to pitch conspiracy theories. Like, you'll hear this one going around about Canelo was ducking fighters, and that's a whole load of boo-boo, and I plan to demystify all that. First off, we do have a current undisputed champion in boxing right now. We have Josh Taylor. He just beat Jose Ramirez and became the undisputed junior welterweight champion. We've got Teofimo Lopez claiming to be undisputed, but then we've got Devin Haney with that green WBC belt, and if there's a dispute to it, unfortunately, I don't think it can truly be considered undisputed. I don't write the rules to this, that's just kind of how it's going on. I'm not trying to upset the different fan bases. I know the stands for specific fighters tend to get very protective if anything remotely sounding like criticism affects their fighters. I'm not criticizing, I'm just letting you know what's going on with the current state of boxing and undisputed. So basically, in boxing, we have a champion. You win a belt, right? If you get more than one belt from more than one of the sanctioning bodies, you end up becoming a unified champion. Now, when I speak of sanctioning bodies, there are only 4 sanctioning bodies that are really considered for undisputed. There are less prestigious organizations like the IBO, the NABF, the Ring Magazine. They all have titles, but when it comes to the undisputed discussion, we only talk about the 4 main sanctioning bodies. Those 4 main sanctioning bodies are the WBA, the WBO, the IBF, and the WBC. In order to become an undisputed champion in a weight division, you must have all 4 of those belts. It's a very difficult undertaking for a fighter to get, because we know in today's day and age of boxing, what fighters like to do is they like to cherry pick their opponents selectively. If they feel that division is too dangerous, they'll either drop down in weight or go up in weight. This is made popular especially by Floyd Mayweather, but rest assured, Floyd Mayweather Jr. wasn't the first one to play this game of mixing up different weights, avoiding certain fighters, targeting certain fighters when they show weakness. To become undisputed is a more difficult undertaking than just becoming a champion, because you tend to have to fight young fighters in their prime, and there's only a short window of opportunity to which you can become an undisputed champion, being that, you know, belts could change hands. The politics in boxing makes it almost impossible, especially if the opposing fighter that has the belt you want is from a different promotional company. I'm not going to get into all that. We're going to talk about what it means to be undisputed. So say you have one of the major belts, the 4 major belts, I just mentioned them, WBA, WBO, IBF, and WBC, right? If you have one of those belts, you're just a champion. If you have multiples of those belts, up to 3, you're unified. If you have all 4, you're undisputed. And if you get all 4, that makes you the lineal champion also. Now, I think as far as boxing aficionados, writers, critics, and boxing snobs are concerned, the lineal championship is the most important championship in any weight division. The lineal championship does not come with a championship belt. The lineal championship is kind of a documented history since the beginning of all of these weight divisions, and it really goes back to John L. Sullivan becoming the first heavyweight champion in boxing. He was the first lineal heavyweight champion in boxing. It's just something the specialists on the sport document. So essentially, it's the man that beats the man. So when they had single belts, you were the undisputed champion off the top just by having single belts. Then more sanctioning bodies came into play. It was 2 belts, then it was 3 belts. Now we live in the 4-belt system. Boxing is a huge international sport. I think we need to have more than one sanctioning body. Obviously, I think the biggest flaw with all these sanctioning bodies is the fact that they have multiple belts for the same division. They've got a super belt, a regular belt, an interim belt, the franchise belt. That's where it gets really murky and convoluted. But boxing is a huge sport. It cannot all fit under one umbrella like MMA does with UFC. That's just not how it's going to work with boxing. There's too many countries and too many hands involved in the pot. It's a huge sport. Gotta love it. So Canelo Alvarez is on his quest to become undisputed champion, the first undisputed champion. To make it even better, he's also Mexican, so he's going to be the first Mexican undisputed champion of the super middleweight division. The critics will knock him and say he's not fighting Jermall Charlo, or he's not fighting Bubu Andrade. Now, Bubu Andrade, Jermall Charlo, they're not even in the super middleweight division, nor do they have belts that Canelo needs in his quest to become undisputed. Canelo is chasing history. He wants to be in the belts. He wants to be in the history books for getting those belts as the undisputed super middleweight champion. Now, he did have some of the belts at middleweight, but there have been undisputed middleweight champions in the past. Emil Griffith, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, Bernard Hopkins. So he wants to be the first to be in the history books. Y'all can't knock that. Look, I'm not trying to knock the Charlo fanboys. I'm not even trying to knock the Benavidez fanboys. I get it. But a lot of y'all maybe don't understand how the chess moves work. It's definitely a critical decision each fighter picks, even though fans in general just want to see fighters go through the most bloodthirstiest, nasty fights with who they view to be the most savage fighters. It doesn't really work like that in the real world of boxing, folks. They go on the extent of their resume, how much money they can possibly make from the fight, and also does that fighter have his own pull. So unfortunately, whether or not boxing fans in America understand, Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders have huge pull over there across the pond. They were actually the no-brainer picks. And that's not because of their skill sets. They're actually excellent boxers. A lot of American boxing audiences tend to not see the global picture of boxing, but let me put it to you in perspective as far as Canelo's selection of opponents. As far as I can understand right now, just off my head, I didn't Google this, America doesn't have the most championship belts currently in boxing. They're distributed all over the world, mostly in across the pond. Russia's got a bunch of the belts, Mexico's got a bunch of the belts, and Asia in the lower divisions. So we need to get out of this egocentric thing to think that America is the end-all be-all. Anyways, Undisputed Championship, you get all 4 belts. At the same time, you become the lineal champion. Now, the lineal champion is an interesting thing because you can only lose your lineal title in that weight division if you vacate that weight division or should you decide to retire. So let's take Tyson Fury, for example. In 2016, I think it was, he beat Vladimir Klitschko. He became a unified heavyweight boxing champion in addition to becoming the lineal boxing champion. And then we had that incident where Tyson Fury had a mental and emotional breakdown and went into the substance abuse thing. He fell off the game. The sanctioning bodies took all of his belts away, but he is still the lineal champion of the heavyweight division. Until somebody beats him or he retires, he is that dude. Hate to break it to you Wilder fans or you AJ fanboys. Look, I don't make the rules to this. I'm just relaying it to you. So, there you go. I broke down the Undisputed, what it means to be unified. That means you have some of the belts, not all of them. Undisputed means you have all 4 belts. Lineal means you're the undisputed and you're the lineal dude, but you could be the lineal guy in the weight division without being undisputed if you beat that guy in the weight division who had the undisputed title. I know it's confusing. This is boxing, It's just as technical as soccer or baseball or basketball. There's so many different small caveats and rules. Nobody knows them all. But the more you know about the sport, the better it is to understand the sport, and you become less biased and you start to see the big picture. So anyways, I hope that clears it up for you guys. Undisputed, lineal, regular champion. Welcome to boxing, folks. Leave a comment if you have any questions. Don't forget to hit that like button. Press follow if you haven't already done so. This is Hot Boxing Minute, y'all. I'm going to be the future of this boxing analysis thing on YouTube. Mark my words.